I need you to do this.
Okay. Amber Brown had a perfect marriage. Actually, almost perfect. Because there was one shadow. One subject that Alexei never brought up. Children. Every time Amber mentioned it, casually, hopefully, he would shut down, change the subject, leave the room, turn into another person. Amber didn't understand, but she loved him too much to push. Until the day she found out she was pregnant by the man who told her to get rid of what was inside her belly, and then everything fell apart. This story will surprise you. Hi, my name is Lena, and I'm the creator of this channel. Now on the screen, I'm showing you the members of our channel, and I wanted to thank all of them for the incredible support they give me to continue this project. Creating good stories for you is what motivates me to wake up every day. And before we get into the story, tell me, can a couple where one wants to have kids and the other doesn't work out? Say it down below, and maybe your comment will appear in the next video. Chapter 1, Cafe and Destiny.
10 minutes is enough.
Yes, plenty of time.
2 years ago, when I bumped into that man at the cafe on Main Street and spilled my cup on the floor, I had no idea I was about to meet the greatest love of my life and also the greatest pain I would ever feel. The coffee spread across the light wooden floor as I quickly crouched down to try to clean up the mess with paper napkins that seemed incapable of absorbing all that hot liquid. Sorry, I said without looking up, feeling completely clumsy and late for work. I didn't see you coming and I was too rushed to pay attention to what was around me. It's okay, replied a deep male voice that made something strange happen in my stomach. Are you in a hurry? I looked up and found the most handsome man I'd ever seen in my life. Tall, perfectly styled dark hair, brown eyes so intense they seemed to see right through me, and a suit that probably cost more than my 3-month salary. He crouched down beside me and started helping me gather my belongings that had fallen from my bag along with the coffee. Work, I finally managed to say, feeling my face heat up. School. I have students waiting for me and I'm already late because of traffic. He smiled in a way that made my heart race in a way I didn't expect. Can I make up for the lost coffee? I'll buy you another one before you go. I should have said no. Should have grabbed my things, thanked him politely, and run out of there before those dark eyes made me completely forget I had responsibilities. But something about the way he looked at me, with an intensity that seemed genuinely interested and not just polite, made me hesitate for a moment that seemed to stretch on forever. Okay, I answered against all my better judgment. But quick, I have 10 minutes tops. 10 minutes is enough, he said, as he stood up and offered me his hand to help me up. To start, I took his hand and felt an electric shock run through my arm when our fingers touched. The way he held my hand for a second longer than necessary told me he had felt it too. That strange energy impossible to ignore that hung in the air between us like something almost tangible. 10 minutes turned into 2 full hours. I called the school making up an excuse about a car problem, and stayed there in that cafe talking to a complete stranger, as if I'd known him for years. The connection was instant, overwhelming, the kind you read about in novels and think doesn't exist until you experience it yourself. Alexei Salvatore, he introduced himself when we finally sat down with our fresh hot coffees. Amber Brown, I replied, feeling my name sound too simple compared to his. I teach literature at a private school. Shakespeare, Bronte, Austen. All the classics that most teenagers find boring until they discover the passion and drama hidden in the pages. He leaned forward with genuine interest shining in his eyes. Shakespeare? Romeo and Juliet? Among others, I confirmed, smiling. But also the tragedies. Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello. The stories where love and power destroy people from the inside out are always the truest ones. True, he repeated as if savoring the word. And you? Do you prefer romantic comedies or tragedies? Depends on the day, I admitted, taking a sip of my coffee. Sometimes I want to believe in happy endings, and other times I need the brutal honesty of seeing how things can really end badly. Realist, he observed with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I like that. And you? I asked, wanting to shift the focus to him. What do you do, Alexei? Business, he answered vaguely. Import. My family is Italian and we have some ventures that require a lot of my time. Interesting, I commented, even without understanding exactly what he meant. Do you read? When I have time, he said, leaning back in his chair without taking his eyes off me. But I prefer living stories to reading about them. Living is better, I agreed, feeling something tighten in my chest under that intense gaze that seemed capable of reading every thought passing through my mind. Can I see you again? He asked when I finally looked at my watch and realized how much time had passed. Dinner? Tomorrow night? Yes, I replied without hesitating this time. Dinner. 6 months later, I already knew the truth about what Alexei really did. He wasn't just an import businessman like he'd said that first day. He was the Italian Mafia boss, the don of one of the most powerful and dangerous families on the East Coast. When he told me over an elegant dinner, looking into my eyes and clearly expecting me to run away and never look back, I just held his hand across the table and said I saw the man, and not the title he carried. The months that followed were the most intense of my life. Dinners at expensive restaurants where he'd reserve the entire floor, just so we could have privacy. Weekend trips to places I'd only seen in travel magazines, shared laughter over silly things that shouldn't be so funny, and deep conversations about life and what we wanted from it. The chemistry between us was absurd, overwhelming, the kind that made my whole body react when he walked into a room. A year after we met in that cafe where I spilled my cup, Alexei knelt down in a seaside restaurant as the sun set behind him, painting everything gold and pink. "Amber," he said, with that husky voice that always made me tremble inside, "you're the light in my dark world. You make me feel something I haven't felt in years, maybe never felt before meeting you. Will you marry me?" I cried happy tears as I nodded, completely unable to form words through the knot of emotion closing my throat. "Yes," I finally managed to say between sobs. "Always yes." We got married 6 months later, in an intimate but beautiful ceremony, with only our closest friends and some members of his family who came especially from Italy for the occasion. They were the 2 happiest years of my life, or almost the 2 happiest years, because there was one shadow hanging over our perfect happiness, a single subject that Alexei simply wouldn't touch, and that left me increasingly restless as time passed, and I realized it wasn't just casual avoidance. Children. Every time I mentioned the subject casually or hopefully, even if it was just commenting on a friend's baby or a cute scene of a child on the street, Alexei would change completely. He'd shut down like a door slamming, abruptly change the subject, or simply leave the room without explanation. It was as if the mere mention of children activated something in him that transformed him into a different person, colder and more distant than the passionate man I knew. That autumn morning, 2 years after our wedding, I was making coffee in our modern kitchen when I finally decided to address the subject more directly and honestly. Alexei hugged me from behind as I stirred the sugar in my cup and kissed my neck in the way that always made my entire skin break out in goosebumps and my heart race. "Good morning, amore mio," he murmured against my skin with that Italian accent that became more pronounced when he was relaxed. "Good morning?" I replied, turning in his arms so I could look into his eyes. "Alexei, can we talk?" "About our future?" I felt him tense immediately, as if his entire body was preparing for battle. "What part of the future?" "Family," I said, watching the change in his expression go from soft to guarded in a matter of seconds. "Children. We've never really talked about this seriously, and I need to understand." He pulled away as if I had physically burned him, and his expression closed completely, becoming that cold mask I rarely saw, but that scared me every time. "There's nothing to talk about, Amber." "But I want to," I insisted, feeling a pang of pain in my chest at his coldness. "Children. Eventually. Don't you want them? Have you never thought about it?" "No," he answered with a coldness in his voice that cut me like sharp glass. "Why?" I asked, desperately trying to understand what was behind that absolute refusal. "Won't you even consider the possibility? Not even for a second?" "It's not about considering," he said, avoiding my gaze in a way that told me there was much more than he was willing to share. "It's about not wanting. I never wanted, and I never will want." "But why?" I repeated, feeling tears burning in my eyes as I tried to reach some understanding of what was happening. "Help me understand this, Alexei, because I really can't." "There's nothing to understand," he cut in dryly with a finality in his voice that left no room for discussion. "I don't want children, period. The subject is closed." He left the kitchen, leaving me alone with my cooling coffee and a confusion of emotions I didn't know how to process or what to do with. This wasn't just a preference or a lifestyle choice. It was something deeper, more painful, something he carried locked inside himself and categorically refused to share with me, even after 2 years of marriage and 3 of being together. What could be so terrible that he couldn't even talk about the subject? The following weeks were the tensest of our marriage. Every time I tried to touch on the subject again, tried to open the conversation gently, or find a different angle of approach, Alexei would completely shut down or make up an excuse to leave the room before I could push further. The emotional distance between us grew with each passing day without resolution. That's when I called Juliet, my best friend since college, completely desperate for advice, or at least someone who could listen to me without judgment. "I don't understand," I vented, holding the phone so tightly my fingers hurt and turned white. "Why is he so closed off about this? It's like it's a trigger that turns him into a completely different person from the one I know and love." "Have you asked directly?" Juliet suggested, suggested from the other end of the line with that practicality that always characterized her. Like if there's some trauma or specific fear related to having children, he won't talk, I replied, feeling the frustration grow and take over me like a wave. He just changes the subject or leaves the room before I can push further or extract any kind of real explanation. And you, she said carefully, as if walking on eggshells, you want children. A lot. That's not negotiable for you, is it? I know, I admitted quietly, feeling the weight of that truth. But I love him, Juliet. So much. And I thought that maybe with time he'd change his mind or at least open up to really talk about it. And if he doesn't change, she asked, asking the question I didn't want to face, but that hung over me like a dark cloud. I stayed silent because I had no answer, because I didn't want to think about the possibility of having to choose between the man I loved more than anything and the future with children I'd always dreamed of having since I was little. A month after that conversation, alone in the bathroom of our house while Alexei was at work, I looked at the pregnancy test with my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the small white plastic object. Positive. The word blinked on the digital screen, as if it were shouting at me, changing my entire reality in a single second. 6 weeks pregnant. I sat on the cold bathroom floor, with the test still in my hand, and let all the emotions hit me at once, like an avalanche. Shock, because we weren't trying to get pregnant and I didn't even imagine this was happening. Joy, because I'd always wanted to be a mother for as long as I could remember. Fear, because I knew exactly what Alexei's position was on having children. And a foolish, persistent hope that when he found out it was real, when it was no longer hypothetical, but an actual baby growing inside me, he would change his mind. He'll change, I whispered to myself, touching my still completely flat and imperceptible belly. When he finds out he's going to be a father for real, that our baby is here, he'll want this. He has to want this. I spent the entire day planning exactly how to tell him in the best possible way. I'd make a special dinner with all his favorite dishes, light candles to create a romantic and perfect atmosphere, and then tell him what I was sure would be the best news anyone could give to the person they love. The excitement grew inside me with each passing hour as I prepared everything. That night, when Alexei came home tired but smiling at the smell of homemade Italian food I rarely made, I was nervous, but still hopeful that everything would work out. He sat at the table and looked at me with that way that always made my heart race and my legs go weak, even after so long together. "Smells good," he commented, picking up his fork and watching me with evident curiosity. "What's the special occasion?" "I just wanted to do something special for us," I replied, feeling my hands sweat under the table as I tried to control my nerves. "Alexei, I need to tell you something important about our future." "What is it?" he asked, his voice already starting to tense as it always did when he sensed where the conversation was going. "It's about our future," I began, taking a deep breath and gathering all the courage I had. "The future of our family, and I need you to listen to me until the end before reacting or saying anything." "If this is about children again," he interrupted me, his voice turning icy and distant. "Let me finish," I asked, feeling my heart race dangerously. "Please, Alexei, just listen to me. What if, hypothetically speaking, I got pregnant? By chance, without planning, it just happened. What would we do? What would happen to us?" His answer came fast, brutal, and completely devastating. "You'd get an abortion." I felt the entire world stop around me as if time had frozen. "What? If you get pregnant?" he said, with an icy voice I'd never heard from him before. "By chance, accident, whatever reason, you abort. It's not negotiable, Amber. It's that simple." Tears began to burn my eyes as I processed those terrible words, knowing I was already pregnant at that exact moment. "What if I don't want to? What if I want to have the baby? Then we have a problem," he replied, maintaining that cold and distant tone that cut me like a razor. "Because I don't want children. I never wanted, and I never will want. And you knew that when you married me, Amber." "I didn't know it was so absolute," I replied, my voice shaking as much as my hands. "I thought that maybe with time, with our love, you'd change your mind or at least consider it." "There's no with time," he cut in with cruel finality. "My position doesn't change. It will never change. So we understand each other now? Is it clear?" I cried, unable to respond, unable to tell the truth that burned inside me. Alexei probably thought I was just upset about the conversation, that I would eventually accept it and we'd move on. He had no idea of the bomb that had just exploded between us. "Amber," he said, his voice softening a bit at the sight of my tears, "I love you so much, more than I thought I'd be capable of loving someone. But children? No, never. Sorry if that hurts you, but it's the truth." He left the room, leaving me alone with the special dinner getting cold and my world falling apart. I sat there with my hand over my belly, where our baby was growing without him knowing, and let the tears fall freely down my face. "He doesn't know," I whispered to the empty silence of the room. "I'm already pregnant and he wants me to. I couldn't finish the sentence, just cried more as the reality of what I would need to do settled in. No love was greater than the love I already felt for the baby growing inside me. Not even the love I felt for the man who had just destroyed my heart without even knowing it. Our protagonist Amber fell for an illusion that many fall for, thinking she could change a person who doesn't want to change. Chapter 2.
I don't want children.
What? Are you serious?
I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake staring at the ceiling of the bedroom I shared with Alexei, listening to his deep breathing beside me as he slept completely oblivious to the fact that our life was about to change forever. My hand rested on my still flat belly, protecting the secret that was growing inside there, the baby he had made so clear he didn't want. With each passing hour, the decision became clearer in my mind, even though it broke my heart into pieces. I couldn't tell him, not after what he said, that brutal coldness with which he declared I should get in termination if I got pregnant. How could I risk my child like that? How could I put this innocent child in a position where their own father would reject them before they were even born? When the sun began to rise through the bedroom window, illuminating everything with that soft golden morning light, I already knew exactly what I needed to do. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called Juliet before I could change my mind, or courage could completely abandon me. "Juliet," I said when she answered with the sleepy voice of someone who just woke up. "I need you. Now. Please come here." "Girl, what happened?" she asked, immediately alert upon hearing the desperation in my voice. "Is everything okay? Did Alexei hurt you?" "No," I replied, feeling the tears start to fall again like they had fallen all night. "Just come, please. I need to talk to you, and I can't do this over the phone." 40 minutes later, Juliet was knocking on the front door of our house. Alexei had left early for a business meeting, leaving me alone with my terrifying thoughts and the decision that weighed on me like a mountain. I opened the door, and my best friend immediately hugged me when she saw my face swollen from so much crying. "My God, Amber," she said, leading me to the living room couch. "What happened?" "You're scaring me." "I'm pregnant." The words came out of my mouth in a broken whisper. 6 weeks. And last night I asked Alexei, hypothetically, what he would do if I got pregnant by chance. I paused, feeling the pain pierce through my chest again. He said I'd get an abortion. No negotiation, no discussion, just that I'd get in termination as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Oh my God. Juliet hugged me tighter as I collapsed against her. "Amber, he doesn't know you already are." "No," I replied, crying against her shoulder. I was going to tell him. I made a special dinner, lit candles. I was so hopeful and naive, but before I could reveal it, I asked that to test the waters first, and he was so cold, Juliet, so absolute and brutal, as if it wasn't even an option to consider having the baby. "And you don't understand why?" she asked gently, running her hand through my hair in a comforting gesture. "Why he's so against the idea of having children." "He won't talk," I replied, with frustration mixed with pain. "He just completely shuts down, changes the subject, leaves the room. It's like an impenetrable wall every time I try to understand what's behind this absolute refusal." "And now?" Juliet held me by the shoulders, making me look into her eyes. "What are you going to do, Amber? This is a decision that will change your entire life." I took a deep breath, feeling certainty settle in my chest despite the pain. Part of me wants to tell him, wants to believe that when he finds out it's real, that our baby is really here growing inside me, he'll change his mind. That the love he feels for me will be greater than whatever stops him from wanting this. I paused, wiping the tears from my face. But the other part, the part that's a mother now, is afraid. Very afraid. What if he doesn't change? What if he insists on what he said? "I can't risk that, Juliet. So what do you want?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer from my tone of voice. "I need to choose," I replied, touching my belly again with that protective gesture that was already becoming instinctive. "Between him and the baby, and I've already chosen. No love is greater than the love I already feel for my child. Not even the love I feel for Alexei, as much as it destroys me to admit it." "You're going to leave?" Juliet asked, her eyes also welling up now. "Yes," I confirmed, feeling pain and determination mix inside me. "I'm asking for a divorce, and I won't tell him about the pregnancy. Never. He made it very clear he doesn't want this, so I'm going to raise my child alone, away from him, where my baby is safe from this rejection." "Are you absolutely sure?" she questioned, holding my hands tightly. "Because once you do this, there's no going back, Amber." "No," I admitted honestly. "I'm not sure about anything, but it's the only option I see where my child stays protected. My baby comes first now, before everything and everyone." A week later, I was sitting in the office of a divorce lawyer, signing papers that would make the end of my marriage to the man I loved more than anything in the world official. My hand shook so much that my signature came out almost illegible, but I forced the pen to move across the paper anyway. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Salvatore?" the lawyer asked, watching me with that professional but slightly concerned expression. "Divorce is a very serious and final step." "I am," I lied, because certainty was the last thing I felt, but I had plenty of determination. I returned home that afternoon with the divorce papers stored in my bag as if they were a bomb about to explode. Alexei was there when I arrived, sitting on the living room couch with a glass of whiskey in his hand and a serious expression on his face that told me he knew something was wrong. "Where were you?" he asked, standing up when he saw me enter. "I tried calling several times and you didn't answer." "Alexei," I said, taking a deep breath and gathering all the courage I had, "I need to talk to you. Sit down, please." He sat down slowly without taking his eyes off me, those dark brown eyes I loved so much now full of apprehension. I took the papers out of my bag and placed them on the coffee table between us, knowing that once I did this, there would be no turning back. "Divorce." He read the word on the cover of the document, and his face turned completely white. "What? Why? What's happening, Amber?" "Because we want different things from life," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady despite the tears that were already starting to fall. "I want family, children, a future with kids running through the house. And you made it very clear you don't want that you'll never want it. I can't live like this, Alexei, without hope, without the future I always dreamed of having." "Amber, no!" he practically shouted, getting up from the couch in total panic. "We love each other. We love each other deeply. Isn't that enough? Isn't our love worth more than this?" "I love you," I confirmed, feeling my heart break into 1,000 pieces. So much, more than I thought I'd be capable of loving someone. But love isn't enough when two people want completely opposite things from life. You don't want children and you never will. And I do, desperately. I always have. And I can't give that up. Not even for you. "Amber, please," he begged, coming to me and holding my shoulders with that desperation I had never seen in him before. "We'll work this out. We'll talk. We'll find middle ground, anything. But don't leave me. Please don't leave me." "There's nothing to work out," I replied, even though each word cut me like glass. "Your position doesn't change. You said yourself it's absolute. And mine can't change either, Alexei. Not about this." I paused, touching my belly for a second before quickly lowering my hand. "I'm sorry. I love you and I always will. But I need to go. I need to move on. For my mental sanity and for the future I need to have." Tears ran down his face, and that was like a stab to my heart, because I rarely saw Alexei Salvatore, the powerful don of the Italian Mafia, cry. "I won't let you go," he said, with his voice broken with emotion. "You don't have a choice," I replied gently but firmly. "Sign the papers, please. Let me move on with my life, even if it's a life without you." He stood there looking at me for a long moment, tears still running down his face, before finally walking to the table and picking up the pen. "Okay," he said with his voice completely destroyed. "I'll sign. But Amber, this is a mistake. The biggest mistake of our lives, I guarantee you." "Maybe it is," I agreed quietly, as I watched him sign the papers that would end our marriage. "But it's a mistake I need to make." A month later, the divorce was officially finalized. I moved to a different city, 2 hours away, far enough to start over but close enough not to feel like I was fleeing the country. I found a small, sunny apartment, got a job teaching literature online so I could work from home as the pregnancy progressed, and tried to build a new life for myself and the baby growing inside me. But Alexei, from what Juliet told me through mutual acquaintances, was completely destroying himself. He was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, apparently trying to drown the pain in work and mafia business. He wasn't eating properly, wasn't sleeping, just existing in a state of automatic functioning that worried everyone around him. Luigi Russo, his capo and right-hand man, eventually confronted the boss about his condition. "Boss," he said, watching Alexei down his 5th espresso of the morning, "you've been different since the divorce. You don't sleep, you don't eat, you just work non-stop. This isn't healthy." "Work is all I have now," Alexei replied without looking up from the document spread across his desk. "And Amber?" Luigi pressed carefully. "Have you tried talking to her? Explaining I don't know, trying to win her back?" "She doesn't want to talk to me," Alexei said with a broken voice. "She blocked my number, moved to a different city, started her entire life over away from me. She left me because I can't give her what she wants, what she deserves to have." "Why can't you?" Luigi asked, confused. "Have children? Do you have some medical problem that prevents it?" Alexei was silent for a long moment before responding. "It's not medical. It's a promise I made a long time ago, and I can't break that promise no matter how much it hurts." "Promise to whom?" Luigi insisted, trying to understand. "To myself," Alexei finally replied, looking away. "On my father's deathbed. I made a promise and I can't go back on it now." Luigi was confused, but respected the boss's silence, knowing there was much more to this story than Alexei was willing to share at that moment. Meanwhile, In my new city, I placed my hand on my belly that was starting to grow visibly and whispered to the baby, "Your daddy doesn't know about you," I would say, feeling the tears fall again like they did every night. "And maybe it's better this way. At least you'll grow up loved by me, completely and without reservations, even if it's only by me." But deep in my heart, a part of me still hoped that one day, somehow, things could be different, that Alexei could understand, could heal from whatever stopped him from wanting this, could meet the incredible child that was coming. It was a foolish hope, I knew, but it was the only thing keeping me breathing through the pain of separation. Will Amber's hope for change be in vain? Chapter 3.
You're pregnant?
Yes.
I had no idea.
7 months had passed since the day I signed the divorce papers and left behind the life I built with Alexei. 7 months of absolute silence between us, of solitary rebuilding, of nights crying while feeling the baby move inside me, wishing things could be different. Now, 8 months pregnant, my belly was huge and impossible to hide, living proof of the choice I made and the secret I carried. Life in the new city was peaceful but lonely. I worked remotely as an online literature teacher, which allowed me to stay home as the pregnancy progressed, and my body became increasingly tired. The small apartment I rented had a large window in the living room that let in sunlight every morning, and I spent hours sitting there with my hands on my belly talking to the baby who would soon arrive. "You're huge!" Juliet exclaimed that Saturday afternoon when she arrived for her weekly visit, as she religiously did every weekend since I moved. "Seriously, Amber, that belly grew more since last week." "I know," I replied, laughing as I caressed the belly that seemed to occupy all the space in front of me. "The doctor said the baby is big, healthy, and growing perfectly, and I feel every movement, every kick, as if he's constantly reminding me he's here." "And the sex?" Juliet asked with that gleam in her eyes that always appeared when we talked about the baby. "Did you find out, or are you leaving it as a surprise?" "Boy," I revealed, feeling my heart warm as it always did when I thought about my son. "It's going to be a healthy, strong, perfect boy." The doctor confirmed it at the last ultrasound, and I almost cried with emotion, seeing his little face on the screen. "Have you chosen a name yet?" she asked, sitting next to me on the couch and placing her hand on my belly to feel the baby move. I was silent for a moment, feeling the familiar sadness tighten my chest. "I haven't completely decided yet. Part of me wants something Italian, you know? Because of him. Even though Alexei will never meet our son, he's still half his genetically." "You still think about him," Juliet observed gently, not as an accusation, but as an obvious observation. "Every day." "Yes," I admitted, feeling tears sting my eyes, as always happened when I thought about Alexei. "I can't not think about him. I loved him, still love him even after everything. But my son comes first, will always come first. And Alexei made it very clear he doesn't want this. So it's better this way, better to keep my distance and protect my baby from this rejection." That same day, on the other side of town, Alexei Salvatore was arriving in a black car with dark windows alongside Luigi Russo. They had a business meeting with a partner who lived in that city, a coincidence that had made Alexei's stomach churn since he found out where they were going. "Boss, are you okay?" Luigi asked, noticing the visible tension in the boss's body. "You've been tense since we entered the city." "Amber lives here," Alexei replied, looking out the window as if expecting to see her on every corner. "In this city. I searched after the divorce, found out where she is, but I respected her decision and didn't come. Until today." "And are you going to talk to her?" Luigi questioned, curious about what the boss would do. "I don't know," Alexei admitted, his voice heavy with the pain he still carried 7 months later. "Maybe, if I see her. I just need to know if she's okay, if she's happy, even if it's without me by her side." After the business meeting, Alexei asked Luigi to stop at a supermarket. He needed water, and maybe to walk a bit to process everything he was feeling about being so close to her after so long. That's when he walked into the supermarket and saw her on the other side of the aisle, and his entire world collapsed again. Amber was pushing a cart full of groceries, but that's not what made Alexei freeze completely in the middle of the aisle. It was the belly, huge, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. She was pregnant, very pregnant, and that cut Alexei more deeply than any bullet could. "Boss," Luigi whispered beside him, following the boss's fixed gaze. "Is that Amber?" "Yes," Alexei managed to say, his voice coming out strangled. "And she's pregnant." Thoughts exploded in his mind like fireworks. She divorced him 7 months ago, was now pregnant with apparently many months, which meant she got pregnant right after leaving him. The pain was absurd, devastating, the feeling of betrayal mixed with loss burning his chest. "Are you going to talk to her?" Luigi asked, seeing the boss start walking toward her as if he couldn't control his own steps. Alexei didn't respond, just walked until she was grabbing something from a shelf, completely oblivious to his presence in the supermarket. When he finally got close enough, he said her name with a voice he barely recognized as his own. Amber. She froze instantly, and Alexei saw the exact moment recognition passed through her body. Amber turned slowly, and when their eyes met for the first time in 7 months, Alexei felt his heart break again. "Alexei!" she exclaimed with obvious panic stamped on her face. "What are you? How are you here?" But Alexei couldn't take his eyes off her belly. "You're pregnant," he said, as if he needed to say it out loud to believe what he was seeing. Yes," Amber replied, instinctively placing her hand on her belly in a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Alexei. "How far along?" he asked, feeling his heart race as he tried to do the math in his head. Amber visibly hesitated before lying. 5 months. The math was quick and brutal in Alexei's mind. 7 months since the divorce. Her saying she's 5 months pregnant meant she got pregnant 2 months after leaving him. 2 months. The pain transformed into anger, as a defense mechanism against the suffering that threatened to destroy him right there. "So you got pregnant after," he said, his voice becoming icy and cutting. "After me. 2 months after the divorce. That was fast." "Yes," Amber lied again, feeling tears burn her eyes as guilt consumed her. "Who's the father?" Alexei asked, even knowing the answer would only hurt him more. "That doesn't matter," she replied quietly. "It matters to me," Alexei practically shouted, not caring about the people who were starting to look. "You divorced me saying you wanted children, and 2 months later you're already with someone else? Pregnant? How could you, Amber?" "Alexei, please," she begged, tears now falling freely down her face. "You left me," he continued, his voice breaking with emotion and pain. "Said I couldn't give you what you wanted, and you found someone who could in weeks. Our marriage, our love, meant nothing, absolutely nothing to you. You meant everything," Amber replied, openly crying now. "But you didn't want this. You made it very clear you didn't want it. So She stopped, unable to continue the lie, unable to say anything more without revealing the truth that burned inside her. Alexei looked at her for one more long moment, pain and anger mixed on his face, before pulling away as if he couldn't stand being near her anymore. "Congratulations," he said, his voice completely destroyed, "on the baby, and on the new life, without me." He left the supermarket quickly, almost running, leaving Amber standing there in the middle of the aisle completely falling apart. Tears came in uncontrollable waves as she held onto the cart to keep from falling, the weight of the lie and the pain crushing her chest. "Amber," Juliet appeared running from another aisle where she'd been looking for something. "My God, what happened? Why are you crying like this?" "Alexei," Amber managed to say between sobs. "He was here, saw the belly, and I lied, Juliet. Said I'm 5 months pregnant, that I got pregnant after the divorce. He thinks there's another man." "Why did you lie?" Juliet asked, hugging her friend while trying to process everything. "Because he can't know the truth," Amber replied desperately. "He doesn't want this. Made it very clear I should get an abortion. I can't risk him trying something, trying to convince me, trying to have some control over this. My son is safe this way, away from him and the rejection he would bring." "Amber, you have to tell the truth," Juliet said gently. "Eventually, he deserves to know, and your son deserves to meet his father." "No," Amber replied firmly even through the tears. "Never." He was very clear about his position. "Terminate. Not negotiable." Those were his words. "I can't give him that option. Can't risk it. My son comes first. Always." Chapter 4.
It's my son.
The days following that devastating encounter at the supermarket were the worst Alexei had experienced since the divorce. He couldn't stop thinking about Amber with that huge belly, her eyes full of tears and guilt, the way she had lied so easily about how far along she was. Something didn't add up. A persistent and uncomfortable feeling that there was more to this story than she had told. He was in the private office of the mansion that served as the base for the family business when Luigi entered bringing strong coffee and found the boss staring at nothing with a disturbed expression that worried anyone who knew him well. "Boss?" Luigi said, placing the cup on the desk, and watching the man who led the entire operation seem completely lost. "You've been like this since we came back from that city. What's going on in your head?" "Her belly," Alexei replied, as if he'd been thinking about it nonstop. "It was too big, Luigi. Too big for 5 months of pregnancy. I've seen pregnant women before. I know how it works. And that belly wasn't 5 months. Maybe it's a big baby," Luigi suggested, trying to be reasonable. "Or she got the months wrong. Some women get confused with the dates." "Or she lied," Alexei said, turning to face his capo with absolute intensity. "Luigi, I need you to investigate, discreetly. Find out when she really got pregnant. The real date. Doctor, Records? Whatever you can access without leaving traces. Boss, that's invasion of privacy, Luigi protested, even knowing he'd probably do what the boss was asking. Seriously? Hacking medical records? I don't care, Alexei replied, slamming his hand on the desk hard. Something's wrong here. I feel it in my bones, in my soul, and I need to know the truth. Please, Luigi, do this for me. Luigi sighed heavily before agreeing. Okay, I'll investigate, but it'll take a few days to get access without raising suspicions. A week later, Luigi returned to the office with a serious expression on his face and a folder of documents in his hands that made Alexei's stomach churn before even knowing what it contained. The capo closed the door behind him, ensuring absolute privacy for this conversation. Boss, you're going to want to sit down, Luigi said carefully. What did you find out? Alexei asked, but remained standing because sitting would mean admitting weakness, and he needed to be strong for whatever news came. I got access to her medical records, Luigi began, opening the folder and checking the papers. We hacked the hospital system. Sorry for the invasion, but you asked. And boss, she's not 5 months pregnant like she told you. How far along then? Alexei asked, feeling his heart start to race. 8.5 months, Luigi revealed, watching the boss's reaction carefully. Almost 9, actually. The baby could be born any moment in the next few weeks. Alexei felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. What? But that means the estimated date of conception is here on the paper, Luigi continued, showing the document. About 8 to 9 months ago, which would be exactly when you were still married, boss. She was pregnant before the divorce. No, Alexei whispered, feeling all the emotions explode inside him at once. It can't be. She wouldn't do that. Wouldn't hide something like this from me. Boss, she was pregnant before asking for the divorce, Luigi repeated, letting the information sink in. And she lied to you about it at the supermarket. That baby she's carrying? That's your son. Alexei finally sat in the chair because his legs could no longer support the weight of this devastating revelation. His mind raced back to that terrible night months ago, to the special dinner Amber had prepared, to the hypothetical question she asked that now made complete sense. She was pregnant that night, he said more to himself than to Luigi. When she asked for the divorce, when she asked what I would do if she got pregnant by chance, she was already expecting our child, and his voice broke completely, and I said those horrible things, said she would have to get rid of the baby, that it wasn't negotiable, that she had no choice. Boss, Luigi began, but didn't know what to say in the face of the emotional breakdown of the most powerful man he knew. Oh God, Alexei continued, his hands shaking as he held his head. She was pregnant with our child, and I scared her so much with my brutal reaction that she ran away. Made her think I would force her to do something terrible, that I wouldn't accept the baby in any way. And now she's raising our child alone, away from me, because I was a complete idiot. He punched the desk so hard he cracked the expensive wood, the rage against himself overflowing into physical violence against inanimate objects. Luigi took a step back, knowing it was better to let the boss release the fury before trying to talk rationally. What are you going to do now? Luigi asked when Alexei finally stopped destroying the office and just sat with his head in his hands. I don't know, Alexei admitted, his voice broken. She doesn't want me to know the truth. That's why she lied about how many months pregnant she is. She's protecting herself, protecting our child from me, and maybe she's right to do that. Maybe I really don't deserve to know. Don't deserve to meet this child after the things I said. Boss, you have to talk to her, Luigi insisted gently. Hear the truth from her, not just from hacked records. She deserves the chance to explain, and you deserve the chance to fix this. Later, Alexei said, finally raising his head. After the baby is born, I need to process this first. Need to understand myself before I can face her. Need to figure out why I'm like this. Why I can't accept the idea of being a father without panicking. Why don't you tell me? Luigi suggested, sitting in the chair across from the desk. The truth about why you don't want children? We've worked together for years, boss. You can trust me. Alexei was silent for a long moment, looking at his hands as if he could find the answers there. Because it involves my father, he finally said, his voice low and heavy with old pain. Giovanni Salvatore, and an oath I made on his deathbed, a promise I've carried with me all these years. What kind of oath? Luigi pressed carefully. An oath to never have children, Alexei revealed, closing his eyes against the memories. To end the Salvatore bloodline with me, to ensure that the poison that ran through my father's veins died with him and didn't pass to another generation. But why? Luigi asked, confused. Why would you swear something like that? Because my father was a monster, Alexei said simply, and I was so afraid of becoming like him, of repeating the patterns of abuse and violence he perpetuated, that I swore never to put a child at that risk. Never being a father meant never being able to become the kind of father he was. Boss, Luigi began, but Alexei interrupted him. But now I have a child on the way, he said, opening his eyes full of tears. Amber is carrying my baby, and I already rejected him before he was even born. Maybe I'm already the monster I feared becoming. You're not your father, anymore, Luigi said firmly. And maybe it's time to break that oath. For her, for your son, and for yourself. Alexei didn't respond, just looked out the window as he processed everything he had discovered and all the impossible choices he would have to make in the days to come. Chapter 5.
The bloodline ends here.
That night, Alexei Salvatore did something he rarely did since taking command of the family years ago. He grabbed a bottle of aged Scotch whiskey, poured himself a generous glass, and allowed the alcohol to burn his throat as he tried to drown the memories that surfaced like violent waves against rocks. He was alone in the mansion's private library, surrounded by books he never read and silence that amplified every destructive thought. The discovery that Amber was pregnant with his child, that she was carrying his baby far away and hidden because of the cruel words he said, opened doors deep in his mind that he had locked long ago. Memories he suppressed daily, that he hid under layers of work and responsibility, now exploded like painful fireworks, illuminating all the darkness of his childhood. He poured another glass of whiskey and closed his eyes, letting the memories come. Alexei was 8 years old when he understood that his father wasn't like the other kids' fathers at school. Giovanni Salvatore came home drunk most nights, the smell of cheap alcohol mixed with tobacco and violence permeating the air before he even crossed the door. That specific night that Alexei could never forget, he was hiding under the bedroom bed trying to disappear. "Alexei!" Giovanni shouted with that voice that made the 8-year-old boy tremble with absolute terror. "Where are you, you useless brat?" Alexei remained quiet under the bed, holding his breath and praying his father wouldn't find him this time. But Giovanni always found him, always discovered where he was hiding, as if he could smell his own son's fear like a predator smells prey. "Found you," Giovanni said, pulling Alexei by the arm with so much force the boy felt something pop in his shoulder. "You're useless, weak. You'll never be a real man. You shame me just by existing." The slap came fast and brutal, hitting little Alexei's face with enough force to leave fingerprints on the pale skin. The boy cried, couldn't hold back the tears of pain and fear that ran down his hurt face. "Men don't cry," Giovanni shouted, hitting again. "You shame me, crying like a girl. You're pathetic." Alexei tried to stop crying, swallowed the sobs so hard he felt his throat hurt, but the tears kept falling, betraying his weakness. Giovanni kept beating him that night until his son passed out on the cold bedroom floor, and when Alexei woke up hours later, he was alone with his entire body aching and his heart broken. The memory shifted, moved forward in time, like a terrible movie he was forced to watch repeatedly. Alexei was now 15, taller but still thin and weak compared to his huge and violent father. Giovanni was trying to force him into the family business, pushing a cold, heavy gun into the hands of the teenager who didn't want that life. "You're going to learn," Giovanni ordered, holding Alexei's hands around the gun with painful force. "Family business isn't optional. You're a Salvatore. It doesn't matter what you want, you're going to obey." "I don't want this," Alexei protested, trying to free his hands. "I want to study, go to college, have a different life. Please, father, don't force me to do this." The punch came straight to his stomach, knocking all the air out of Alexei's lungs and making him double over in pain on the floor. Giovanni stood over him with that look of absolute contempt that marked all interactions between father and son. "College?" Giovanni spat the words as if they were poison. "You're a soldier, future dawn of this family. You have no choice. You never did. You'll do what I say or you'll suffer the consequences." And Alexei suffered the consequences that night, and many others that came after. He was beaten until he agreed to hold the gun, until he agreed to do the training, until he completely gave up on dreams of a different life away from the Mafia and violence. Giovanni broke his son's spirit little by little, transforming the sensitive boy into a hard, cold man who showed no emotions. The last memory was the most painful of all. Alexei was 20 when Giovanni was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and part of him felt a guilty relief that he would finally be free from the tyrant who controlled every aspect of his life. But Giovanni had one last act of cruelty, saved even on his deathbed. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and death when Alexei entered the private room where his father was slowly dying. Giovanni looked smaller in the hospital bed, weakened by the disease, but his eyes still carried that poisonous malice that never left him. "Alexei," Giovanni said, his voice weak but still full of command. "You're going to be Dawn now. Take over the family as it was always your destiny." "I don't want to," Alexei replied, because for the first time in his life he could say no without fear of physical consequences. "I never wanted this. You forced me. It doesn't matter what you want." Giovanni coughed violently before continuing. "You're a Salvatore, and you're going to continue the bloodline. You're going to have children. You're going to pass the business to them like I passed it to you. The Salvatore family is eternal." Something inside Alexei broke at that moment, all the accumulated rage from 20 years of abuse exploding in a cold, calculated decision. He leaned closer to his dying father's bedside and made an oath he would carry for the rest of his life. "No," Alexei said, with an icy voice that mirrored his father's for so many years. "Your bloodline, it ends with me. I will never have children, never pass your rotten blood to another generation. You want eternity? You're going to die, and the Salvatore family dies with you. I'm the last one. I swear it now. I'll never be a father, never be like you, never put a child in the same hell you put me in." Giovanni tried to scream, tried to get up from the bed to hit his son one more time, but his body betrayed his will, and he died right there with rage stamped on his face and hatred shining in his eyes until the last second. Alexei stood by the bed watching his father die without feeling anything but relief, and the absolute certainty that his oath was sacred. Back in the present, Alexei opened his eyes in the library with tears running down his face and the whiskey bottle half empty. He had made that oath because he was so afraid of becoming like Giovanni, so terrified of repeating the cycle of abuse and violence, that completely eliminating the possibility of being a father seemed like the only safe solution. The phone rang, breaking the heavy silence of the library. It was Luigi, worried because the boss hadn't responded to messages for hours. Alexei answered with a voice hoarse from tears and alcohol. "Boss, are you okay?" Luigi asked, hearing the boss's emotional state through the line. "I swore never to have children," Alexei said, ignoring the question. "On my father's deathbed, because I was afraid, Luigi. So afraid of being like him, of hitting my child like he hit me, of screaming and destroying an innocent child the same way I was destroyed. So I swore to end the bloodline, to protect a child who would never exist from myself." "Boss," Luigi began, but Alexei kept talking as if he couldn't stop now that he'd started. "My father was a monster," he explained, his voice breaking. "He beat me since I was 8, called me useless and weak, forced me into the Mafia when I wanted to study and have a different life. He broke my spirit little by little until I became what he wanted. And now I have a son coming. And all I can think is, what if I do the same thing? What if I hurt my baby like I was hurt?" "You won't hurt your son," Luigi said with absolute firmness. "Boss, you're not your father." "How do you know?" Alexei questioned desperately. "What if I have the same violence inside me? What if when my child cries I react like he reacted? What if I can't control it?" "You won't, because you're afraid of it," Luigi explained with gentle patience. "Monsters aren't afraid of hurting others, boss. Your father didn't have that fear, didn't feel guilt, didn't question his actions. But you're terrified of the possibility of hurting your son. That difference, that fear, is exactly what makes you different from him. It's what guarantees you'll never be like he was." Alexei processed those words in silence, letting them sink in slowly. "But the oath I made was made in pain and anger," Luigi interrupted gently, "not in clarity or rationality. You can break that oath, boss, if you want to, if you choose to be different." "What if I can't?" Alexei whispered with evident fear in his voice. "Then you get help," Luigi suggested. "Therapy, emotional work, process all this trauma you've been carrying for years. Learn to be the father you want to be, not the father you had. For Amber, for your son, but mainly for yourself." "I don't know if I have the strength for that," Alexei admitted, feeling the weight of decades of emotional pain. "You do," Luigi affirmed. "You're the strongest man I know, boss. Strong enough to break cycles, to be different, to choose love instead of fear. You just need to decide to try." Alexei was silent for a long time after hanging up the phone, looking at the whiskey bottle and thinking about all the choices that made him who he was today. Maybe Luigi was right. Maybe it wasn't too late to change, to break the oath he made on a monster's deathbed, to be the father his child deserved instead of the father he had. But first, he would need to confront decades of trauma, forgive the unforgivable, and learn that being a father didn't mean repeating the mistakes of the past. It was a journey that terrified him more than anything. But when he thought about Amber carrying their child alone and scared, he knew he had to try. Chapter 6.
I know what you're doing.
2 weeks after that devastating encounter at the supermarket, I woke up at 3 in the morning with a sharp pain cutting through my belly like a sharp knife. It took me a few confused seconds, still half asleep, to understand what was happening. But when the second contraction came just 5 minutes after the first, reality hit me with full force. It was time. My baby was coming. I grabbed my phone with hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it on the bedroom floor as I dialed Juliet's number. She answered on the third ring with a sleepy voice, but immediately alert when she heard my labored breathing on the other end of the line. "Girl?" she asked, and I could hear sounds of quick movement as if she was already getting out of bed. "Is it now?" "It's now," I confirmed, feeling another contraction start to build inside me. "The contractions are coming every 5 minutes, and they're strong, Juliet. Very strong. I need to get to the hospital now." "I'm on my way," she practically shouted, and I heard the sound of keys and a door slamming. "Hang on tight, I'm already in the car. 15 minutes tops." Juliet arrived in 12 minutes, driving like crazy through the empty early morning streets, helped me down the apartment stairs between contractions that were coming closer and more intense, and practically flew to the nearest hospital. The 20-minute drive seemed to last hours, as I breathed heavily in the passenger seat with one hand gripping the seatbelt and the other holding my belly. "Breathe, Amber," Juliet kept saying as she drove above the speed limit. "You're doing great. Just breathe deep and think that soon you're going to meet your baby." 12 hours. It was 12 full hours of labor that tested every limit of my physical and emotional endurance. 12 hours of contractions that seemed to tear my body in half, of doctors and nurses coming in and out of the room with instructions and encouragement, of Juliet holding my hand so tightly she probably left marks, but I was grateful for every second of that comforting presence. "One more," the doctor said with that calm, professional voice. "You're almost there, Amber. One more strong contraction and your baby will be born." I pushed with everything I had left in my exhausted body, screamed too loud without caring who heard, and then I heard the most beautiful sound in the entire world, my baby's cry filling the room with new and perfect life. Tears immediately ran down my face as the doctor lifted the small covered and crying body for me to see. "It's a boy," she announced, smiling. "Healthy and perfect. Congratulations, Mom." They placed my son in my arms seconds later, all cleaned up and wrapped in a light blue blanket, and when I looked at that tiny little face for the first time, I fell completely and instantly in love. He had dark hair like his father, the same skin tone as Alexei, and when he opened his little eyes for a brief second before closing them again, I saw they were brown too. "Hi," I whispered, touching the delicate little face with a trembling finger. "Hi, my love. I'm your mother. I finally get to meet you after all these months carrying you." I kissed his forehead gently, feeling my heart explode with love. "You're everything. Absolutely everything to me." "He's beautiful," Juliet cried beside me, looking at the baby with total admiration. "Perfect, Amber. You made a perfect baby." "Matteo," I said, testing the name I had chosen a few weeks ago. "Matteo Brown, not Salvatore. Never Salvatore. This will protect your identity, will keep you safe." I spent the next few hours in the hospital room, just holding Matteo, watching every tiny movement he made, memorizing every detail of his face as if he could disappear if I blinked. Juliet eventually left to get some rest, promising to come back in the morning, leaving me alone with my son for the first time. What I didn't know was that at the same moment Juliet was leaving the hospital, Alexei Salvatore was receiving a call from Luigi that would change everything. The capo had kept a discreet source at the hospital since they discovered I lived in that city, just to make sure the boss knew when something important happened. I was breastfeeding Matteo for the first time, amazed at how he instinctively knew what to do, when I saw through the room's glass window a familiar male figure standing in the hallway looking directly at me. My heart stopped completely when I recognized Alexei, and I instinctively held Matteo closer to my chest in a protective gesture. He entered the room slowly as if afraid of scaring me, and when our eyes met for the first time since the supermarket, I saw something different in his expression. It wasn't anger like I expected. It was pain, mixed with something that looked like desperate hope. "Alexei?" I managed to say, even with my voice failing. "What are you doing here? How did you know?" "I know everything, Amber," he said with a hoarse, tired voice, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Everything. He's not the son of someone you met after the divorce. He's my son, our son. You were pregnant when you asked for the divorce and didn't tell me." I felt my entire world shake when I realized he knew the truth. "How did you find out?" I asked, even though I already knew it didn't matter anymore. The secret was over. "I investigated," he admitted without shame, "because something didn't add up. The belly was too big for 5 months, so Luigi hacked your medical records, and we discovered the real conception date." He paused, looking at Matteo in my arms. "You were pregnant that night, when you asked, 'What if I get pregnant by chance?' And I said," his voice broke completely, unable to repeat the terrible words. "You said I'd have to get rid of the baby," I completed, feeling tears burn my eyes as I held Matteo closer. No negotiation, no choice, just that I would have to do it. And I was already pregnant, Alexei, already carrying our child inside me, and I went into total panic because you were so cold and brutal about it. And you ran," he continued with tears now running down his own face, "to protect our son from me, because I scared you so much you thought you needed to raise him alone away from me." "Yes," I confirmed, crying openly. "I ran because I couldn't risk it, couldn't let you try to convince me or pressure me or have any control over it. My son needed to be safe, and the only way to guarantee that was away from you. From me, Alexei repeated as if each word were a stab. You protect him from me, because I don't deserve to meet my own son after the horrible things I said. You're not your father. The words came out of my mouth before I could think, surprising us both. Alexei, I don't know what your father did to you because you never told me completely, but I know who you are. I know the man you are deep down, kind and loving and protective. You're not a monster. But what if I am? He practically shouted with absolute desperation. What if I have the same violence my father had inside me? What if when Matteo cries I react the way Giovanni reacted to me? What if I hurt our son the same way I was hurt my whole life? I finally understood. After all these months without understanding, after all the pain and confusion about why he so absolutely rejected the idea of having children, finally the truth was clear in front of me. Your father hurt you, I said, not as a question, but as a painful confirmation. Physically, he beat you. Yes, Alexei admitted, completely breaking down there in front of me. A lot. For years and years since I was a child. He beat me, yelled, called me useless and weak, destroyed my spirit little by little until I became what he wanted me to be. And on his deathbed, I swore, Amber, I swore never to have children, to end the Salvatore bloodline with me, never to become the kind of father he was, because I was so afraid, so absolutely terrified of repeating the cycle. I looked at Matteo sleeping peacefully in my arms, and then at Alexei falling apart with decades of trauma finally coming to the surface. Alexei, look at him, I said gently. Look at our son. He took a step closer and looked at the baby for the first time for real, and I saw tears fall faster down his face as he observed the perfect little face of the son he helped create. Do you feel like hurting him? I asked, knowing what the answer would be but needing him to hear his own answer out loud. No, Alexei replied with absolute shock in his voice. God, no. I only feel love when I look at him, and fear. So much fear of not being good enough, of messing everything up, of being like my father was. Then you're not your father, I said with absolute firmness. Monsters don't feel afraid of hurting others, Alexei. They don't feel love, don't question their actions, don't worry about being good enough. But you feel all of that. That fear you carry, it's exactly what makes you different from Giovanni. It's what guarantees you'll never be like him. He stayed silent, processing my words as he looked at Matteo with a mixture of love and terror. If you want to be part of his life, I continued, taking a deep breath, if you really want this, you can. But you need to work on the trauma, Alexei. Get professional help, do therapy, process everything your father did to you, for our son, but mainly for yourself. I don't know if I can, he admitted with total vulnerability. Try, I asked, feeling my heart break for him and for the son he still didn't really know. For Matteo, for us, because I still love you, never stopped loving you. But my son comes first always. So if you want a family with us, you fight, you work, you heal, you choose to be different. I want that, Alexei said with conviction cutting through the pain. More than anything in the world. I'll fight, and I promise I won't give up on you. Never. Chapter 7.
He's my son.
In the days following that devastating conversation at the hospital, Alexei really did what he promised. He started intensive therapy with a professional who specialized in trauma, someone Luigi had found through discreet contacts that guaranteed absolute privacy for a Mafia don who needed to heal deep emotional wounds. I knew this because Alexei called me the next morning, his voice still hoarse from so much crying, but determined in a way I had never heard before. I found a therapist, he said without beating around the bush. Mark Vega, specialist in childhood trauma and abuse. First session is tomorrow morning, and I'm going 3 times a week from now on. I'm not giving up, Amber. I promised I'd fight for you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I felt tears of hope burn my eyes as I held Matteo against my chest. I'm proud of you for doing this. I know how hard it is to admit you need help, especially for someone like you who's always had to be strong for everyone. Hiding pain isn't strength, he replied with a wisdom that seemed new. It's weakness. Real strength is facing it, processing it, healing. I learned that yesterday when I held our son and realized he deserves a whole father, not a broken man trying to pretend he's okay. The weeks that followed were intense in different ways for each of us. While Alexei dove deeply into therapy 3 times a week, deconstructing decades of trauma and abuse, I was learning to be a mother to a newborn who seemed to sleep only in 2-hour intervals and cried whenever I tried to put him in the crib. Juliet kept coming every day to help me, bringing food because I forgot to eat, and holding Matteo so I could take a quick shower. Alexei told me about the therapy sessions whenever we talked on the phone, sharing painful details he had never revealed before. Mark made me talk about everything, he said one night, his voice heavy with emotion. Every time my father hit me, every cruel word he said, every moment I felt completely helpless and alone. And you know what Mark said? That the oath I made on Giovanni's deathbed was made in pain and anger, not in clarity or rationality, that I can break that oath if I choose to. And do you want to break it? I asked gently, rocking Matteo, who was starting to get restless. Yes, he replied without hesitation. More than anything, but I'm still so afraid, Amber. Afraid that when Matteo cries a lot or throws tantrums when he's older, something inside me will awaken and I'll react the way Giovanni reacted. Mark says this fear is normal, even healthy, because it shows I care, but it still paralyzes me sometimes. What else did Mark say? I encouraged, wanting to understand the process he was going through. That seeking help already makes me different from my father, Alexei explained, and I could hear hope growing in his voice. Because Giovanni never sought therapy, never admitted he had problems, never tried to change. He was too proud to acknowledge his flaws. But I'm here, doing the work, wanting to be better. That already fundamentally differentiates me from him. When Matteo turned 3 weeks old, I allowed Alexei to come to the apartment for a supervised visit. My heart beat fast when I opened the door and saw him standing there with flowers in his hands, and nervousness stamped on his face as clearly as if it were written. "Hi," he said, handing over the flowers. "I brought these for you. And I bought some things for Matteo too. They're in the car. Diapers, little outfits, toys. I know you probably already have everything, but I wanted to contribute somehow. Come in," I invited, stepping away from the door and feeling a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Alexei entered slowly, looking around the small apartment that had become my home, and eventually his gaze landed on the crib where Matteo was sleeping, wrapped in a blue blanket. I saw his entire face transform when he looked at his son, love and terror mixed in equal parts. "He's grown," Alexei whispered, approaching the crib carefully as if Matteo could break. "Even though it's only been 3 weeks, he looks bigger than at the hospital." "Babies grow fast," I replied, positioning myself beside him. "Do you want to hold him? I can teach you if you're nervous." "I'm terrified," he admitted honestly, but extended his arms anyway. "But I really want to." I picked up Matteo gently from the crib, the baby opening his little eyes briefly before settling again, and placed him in Alexei's arms, showing him how to support the delicate little head and hold the small body firmly but gently. I saw his hands tremble when he received the weight of his son for the first time. "Breathe," I instructed, placing my hand over his to stabilize. "You're doing great. Just breathe deep and relax your shoulders." "He's so small," Alexei said, looking at Matteo with absolute admiration. "So fragile and perfect. What if I drop him? What if I do something wrong?" "You won't drop him," I assured firmly. "Hold him firm but gentle." "Exactly like that. See? You're already doing it perfectly." Matteo settled into his father's arms and went back to sleeping deeply, completely trusting this stranger who held him as if he were the most precious thing in the world. Tears ran down Alexei's face as he watched his son sleeping peacefully. "He trusts me," Alexei whispered with admiration. Even though you're what?" I interrupted, knowing exactly where he was going with that. "His father? Yes, he trusts you, because you're his father, Alexei, and you can be a good father, even an amazing one. I see it in you every time you look at him." "I want to be," he said, looking from Matteo to me. "So much. I want to be good for him and for you. I want to deserve to be in your lives." "Then keep going," I encouraged, feeling hope grow in my chest for the first time in months. "Keep up the therapy, the emotional work, the healing journey, and we'll see how things evolve, okay?" "Okay," he agreed with clear determination in his voice. I watched Alexei holding Matteo for another half hour, the two seeming completely at peace together, in a way that warmed my heart and made me believe that maybe, just maybe, we could really build something beautiful from the broken pieces of our past. He still had a lot of work ahead of him, a lot of trauma to process and heal, but for the first time, I truly believed he could do it. Who would have thought Alexei would have such a complete change of heart, huh? Chapter 8.
I forgive you.
3 months had passed since that first day when Alexei held Matteo in his arms, trembling with fear and love mixed together. 3 months of slow but consistent progress, of regular visits to the apartment that became longer and more comfortable over time, of honest conversations about trauma and healing that brought us closer in ways we had never experienced during our marriage. Alexei continued intensive therapy 3 times a week, without missing a single session. and I could see the transformation happening in him gradually, like a flower blooming after a long and brutal winter. Mateo was 3.5 months old when Alexei called me one night with something different in his voice, a determination mixed with nervousness that immediately caught my attention. I was breastfeeding the baby on the couch when the phone rang, and I answered, putting it on speakerphone so I could continue holding Mateo. "Amber, I need to tell you something," he began, without the usual greetings. "Mark and I had a very intense session today, and he challenged me to do something I've been avoiding for years, something I need to do to really free myself from the past." "What is it?" I asked, feeling curiosity and concern grow inside me simultaneously. "Forgive my father," Alexei said, and I could hear him take a deep breath as if gathering courage. "Mark says that as long as I carry anger and hatred for Giovanni, I'll be trapped in the past in a way that prevents my future. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting or justifying what he did, but about freeing myself from the weight I've been carrying for decades." I adjusted Mateo in my lap before responding, thinking carefully about my next words. "And do you want to forgive? After everything he did to you? It's not about wanting," he explained with raw honesty. "It's about needing. I need to forgive to move forward, to be the father Mateo deserves, to build a future with you without the chains of the past constantly pulling me down." Mark made me realize that every time I react with fear about being a father, it's not Mateo I'm seeing. It's Giovanni's shadow over me. "So what are you going to do?" I asked, even though I already suspected the answer. "I'm going to Sicily," he revealed, "to his grave. I'm going to say everything I could never say when he was alive. I'm going to confront every painful memory, and then I'm going to forgive, not because he deserves forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. And Mateo deserves a free father, not a father imprisoned by a dead man." I felt tears burn my eyes at the courage that required from him. "When are you going?" "Tomorrow morning," he replied. "I'll be gone 3 days. Luigi's coming with me for support. But Amber, I wanted your permission first. I know it means being away from you and Mateo for a few days, and I don't want you to think I'm running away or giving up." "You don't need my permission," I replied gently, "but you have my full approval and support. This is important for your healing, Alexei. Go, do what you need to do, and come back to us when you're ready." "Thank you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "for understanding, for supporting me even after everything, for giving me this chance to be better." Alexei left for Sicily the next morning, and the 2 days of silence that followed were some of the longest of my life. I knew he needed that time alone with his memories and his forgiveness process, but part of me worried about how much it was affecting him emotionally. Juliet came to stay with me to keep me company and help with Mateo while I waited for news. "Do you think he's okay?" I asked Juliet on the second night while rocking Mateo to sleep. "It's been 2 days and he hasn't called or texted. He's processing heavy stuff," Juliet replied, placing her hand on my shoulder comfortingly. "Decades of trauma don't get resolved quickly. Give him time, girl. When he's ready, he'll get in touch." On the third morning, my phone finally rang, showing Alexei's name on the screen. I answered immediately with my heart racing. "Amber," his voice came from the other side, and I could hear something different in it. Something lighter despite the obvious exhaustion. "Sorry I didn't call before. I needed time to process everything alone." "It's okay," I assured. "How are you? What happened?" I heard him take a deep breath before starting to tell me. "I arrived in Sicily and went straight to the cemetery where Giovanni is buried. I stood in front of the tomb for almost an hour, just looking at his name engraved on the stone, feeling all the anger and pain come back like waves drowning me. Luigi stayed in the car giving me space. "And then?" I encouraged when he paused for a long time. "And then I started talking," he continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I said everything, Amber. Every painful memory, every time he hit me, every cruel word that destroyed my spirit little by little. I screamed at a dead man for hours, let out all the anger I'd kept for decades. Luigi said he could hear me from the parking lot. I held the phone tighter, imagining Alexei alone in that cemetery confronting his deepest demons. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was the hardest thing I've ever done," he admitted. "But when I finally had no more anger to scream, when my voice was hoarse and my tears dried up, I said the words Mark had prepared me to say. I said, 'Giovanni, I forgive you, not because you deserve forgiveness, or because what you did was acceptable in any way, but because I deserve peace. My son deserves a father free from your shadow. So I forgive you, and I let you go. You have no more power over me.'" Tears ran down my face as I heard those powerful words. "Alexei, I'm so proud of you, so immensely proud. You know what was most incredible?" he asked, and I could hear wonder in his voice. The moment I said those words, I physically felt a weight lift from my shoulders, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of rocks for years and could finally take it off. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel that constant pressure in my chest. "You freed yourself," I observed, smiling through the tears. Yes, he agreed. I freed myself from him, from the memories, from the stupid oath I made on a monster's deathbed. Mark was right. Forgiving wasn't about Giovanni. It was about me. About choosing peace instead of anger, future instead of past, love instead of fear. And now? I asked, wanting to know how he felt about everything after this transformative experience. Now I'm coming home, he replied with clear determination. Coming back to you and Matteo. Because I finally feel ready, Amber. Ready to be a father without paralyzing fear. Ready to build a family without the shadow of my past ruining everything. Not that the fear disappeared completely. Mark warned me there will always be some level of fear because I care. But now it's manageable fear, not terror that paralyzes me. When are you coming back? I asked, feeling anticipation grow inside me. Flight leaves in 4 hours, he said, and I could hear a smile in his voice. Tomorrow morning I'll be there. If you'll let me, I want to spend the whole day with you. I want to hold my son without trembling. I want to look at you without guilt consuming me. I want to start building the future I almost destroyed because of the past. You're always welcome here, I replied with my heart full of hope. Our door is open to you, Alexei. It always has been. It was just waiting for you to be ready to walk through. After we hung up, I held Matteo against my chest and whispered to the sleeping baby, "Your daddy is coming home, my love, and he's healed, or at least starting to truly heal. Maybe we can be a real family, the three of us together, building something beautiful from the broken pieces." When Alexei arrived the next morning, the difference in him was immediately visible. He still had dark circles from exhaustion and emotional fatigue, but his shoulders were lighter, his expression more open, and when he picked up Matteo in his arms, he didn't tremble once. He held his son with growing confidence, kissed the baby's forehead, and looked at me with gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not giving up on me even when I had given up on myself, for giving me this chance to be better, to be the father Matteo deserves, and the man you deserve. You're doing the work," I replied, touching his face gently. "You're choosing to heal, choosing to be different. That's all I ever asked for." That's true. If there was one thing Amber asked for, it was this. And she got what she wanted, but we're not done yet. Chapter 9.
Marry me again.
2 weeks after Alexei returned from Sicily, transformed by the forgiveness he granted his dead father, he showed up at my apartment door with news that caught me completely by surprise. He had a large suitcase beside him, and that nervous but determined smile I knew so well from our first meetings years ago. "I moved," he announced, when I opened the door holding Matteo, who was awake, and looking curiously at the man standing there. "To this city. I rented an apartment 5 blocks from here. I don't want to live 2 hours away from you anymore, missing every important moment, because I'm too far away." I stood there processing that monumental information, while Matteo stretched his chubby little hands toward his father, as if he already recognized him and wanted to go into his arms. "You moved? But what about the family business? The mansion? Everything you built there? Luigi takes over command there while I stay here," Alexei explained, coming in when I automatically stepped away from the door. "He's more than capable and deserves the promotion. I'll continue to be involved in the business, obviously, but remotely most of the time. My priority now is different. It's him," he pointed to Matteo, "and you. You're more important than any business or property." I felt my heart race at that declaration. "Alexei, this is a huge change. Are you sure?" "Absolutely," he replied, taking Matteo from my arms when the baby practically threw himself toward him. "I lost months of his life because of fear and trauma. I won't miss another day if I can help it. I want to be here for every smile, every developmental milestone, every moment. I want to be the present father I never had." And he really was present in a way that completely surprised me. From that day on, Alexei showed up at the apartment every single day without fail, usually in the morning, bringing fresh coffee and something for breakfast. He quickly learned to change diapers, even though he complained dramatically about the smell every time, making Matteo laugh with his exaggerated faces. "Seriously, how does something so small produce something so terrible?" he'd ask, holding his nose while cleaning Matteo, who kicked his little legs happily. "Your tiny son. This shouldn't be humanly possible." I'd laugh watching that domestic scene I never thought I'd see. Alexei Salvatore, the feared Italian Mafia don, complaining about dirty diapers while our 4-month-old son drooled on his own foot, finding everything hilarious. It was surreal and perfect at the same time. He also insisted on learning to bathe Matteo, even though he was absolutely terrified of dropping the slippery baby the first time. I stood beside him giving instructions while Alexei held our son in the infant bathtub. With such delicacy, he seemed to be handling fine crystal. "Support the head with this hand," I instructed, guiding his movements. "That's it. Perfect. Now use the other hand to wash. See, you're doing perfectly well. He seems to like it," Alexei observed. amazed when Mateo gave a happy little shriek and splashed his little hand in the water. Look how he's smiling. I think bath time is his favorite part of the day. It definitely is, I confirmed, smiling at that beautiful image of father and son. He loves water. Maybe when he's older we can put him in swimming lessons. When he's older, Alexei repeated with admiration. It's still hard to imagine him bigger, walking and talking. It seems like he'll be like this forever, tiny and dependent. The nights were the most revealing of Alexei's complete transformation. Mateo still woke up every 3 hours to nurse, and I was constantly exhausted from accumulated sleep deprivation. One particularly difficult night when Mateo had been crying inconsolably for over an hour, Alexei showed up at the door even though it was almost midnight. "I saw the light on from the street," he said when I opened the door surprised. I figured Mateo was having a rough night. "Can I help?" I handed him the crying baby without hesitation, because I was at the limit of exhaustion. Alexei took Mateo and started walking around the apartment, rocking gently and humming softly in Italian, some lullaby his mother probably sang to him before she died young. Mateo gradually calmed down until he finally fell asleep against his father's broad chest. "Go to sleep," Alexei whispered to me when he saw my exhausted expression. "I'll stay with him tonight. I'll sleep on the couch and take care of him when he wakes up. You need to really rest." "But he'll be hungry," I protested, even though I was already half asleep standing up. "He needs to nurse. Then you leave pumped milk in the fridge and I'll give him a bottle," he suggested with that practicality that came from weeks of studying everything about baby care. "Go, Amber. Sleep. I've got him." And he did. I woke up 7 hours later completely shocked to have slept so long straight through, and found Alexei on the couch with Mateo asleep on his chest, the two completely comfortable together. My heart melted at that scene. It was Juliet who finally verbalized what I'd been feeling for weeks during one of her regular visits. We were having coffee in the kitchen while Alexei played with Mateo in the living room, making the baby laugh with silly peekaboo games. "Girl, look at that," Juliet said, discreetly pointing to the living room. "He's completely changed. The therapy really worked. Alexei is an incredible father to Mateo." "I know," I agreed, watching my ex-husband make ridiculous faces that had our son laughing so hard he started hiccuping. It's surreal to see this transformation. The man who said those horrible things months ago, and the man who's in there playing with our son, seem like completely different people. "So why haven't you gotten back together?" Juliet asked directly, as she always did. "You still love him. He obviously still loves you. Mateo adores his father. What's stopping you?" "Fear," I admitted honestly. "Fear that if we get back together and something goes wrong again, Mateo gets hurt in the process. He comes first always." "But look at him," Juliet insisted. "Alexei did all the work you asked for. Therapy, confronted the trauma, forgave his father, moved cities to be near you. What else does he need to prove?" I stayed silent because she was right. Alexei had done absolutely everything I'd asked him to do, and even more. The question wasn't whether he deserved a second chance. It was whether I was ready to risk my heart again. That night, after Juliet left, Alexei asked to talk after we put Mateo to sleep. We sat on the couch with that respectful space between us we'd maintained for months, and he gently took my hand before starting to speak. "Amber, these months with you and Mateo have been the best of my life," he began with clear emotion in his voice. "Not just visits or isolated moments, but building a routine together, being part of your lives daily, and I want more. I don't want to just be the dad who visits anymore. I want to be a real family." My heart raced, knowing where this was going, but needing to hear the words anyway. "What are you asking?" "A second chance," he said, turning to face me completely. "Marry me again, Amber. Not because we need to fix past mistakes, but because I want to build a new future together. Let me be your husband again, and Mateo's father full-time. Let me love you the way I always should have loved you, without fear, without reservations, completely." "Are you sure?" I asked, even seeing the absolute certainty shining in his eyes. "No remaining fears, no doubts." "Fear will always exist a little," he admitted honestly. "Mark taught me that parents who care always have some level of fear of making mistakes, but it's not the paralyzing terror from before anymore. It's just the healthy fear that keeps me attentive and always trying to be better, and I have zero doubts about wanting this. You are my family, my everything." I looked at that man who had gone through hell to become someone better, who had faced demons he'd carried for decades, who had chosen love over fear repeatedly. "Yes," I replied, feeling tears of happiness. Always yes. Chapter 10.
This time, forever.
6 months had passed since that night when Alexei asked for my hand again, and I said yes with my heart full of renewed hope. 6 months of slow and deliberate construction of a completely new foundation for our relationship, a base strengthened by therapy, honest communication, and love we actively chose every day. Now, on a sunny spring morning, I was about to marry again the man I almost lost because of unhealed trauma. Mateo was a year old now, already walking in a wobbly way and trying to say words that came out more like adorable babbles than real sentences. He was in Juliet's arms, wearing a tiny navy blue suit that Alexei had custom-made for our son, and every time the baby saw his father standing at the improvised altar in the garden of the house we bought together a month ago, he'd shout "Papa" and clap his little hands excitedly. "He looks beautiful," Juliet whispered, adjusting my simple white lace dress that I chose because I wanted something completely different from the elaborate dress from the first wedding. "And so do you, girl. You're radiant." I looked in the mirror one last time before leaving the room, observing the woman who stared back at me. I was different from the Amber who married Alexei the first time 3.5 years ago. I had slight dark circles from nights awake with a baby, a few strands of hair that refused to cooperate no matter how much product I used, and fine lines around my eyes from smiling so much lately. But I was happy in a deep and true way that came from having gone through fire and come out stronger on the other side. The ceremony would be small and intimate, exactly as we wanted. Only 20 people total, our closest friends and some members of Alexei's family who came from Italy specifically to celebrate with us. Luigi was there as best man, smiling proudly at the boss he had helped through the darkest moments. Mark Vega, the therapist who literally saved our future, was also present with his wife because Alexei insisted on inviting him. "Ready?" Juliet asked, offering her arm because I didn't have a father to walk me down the aisle, and my best friend was the obvious choice. "More ready than ever," I replied, taking the simple bouquet of white roses and breathing deeply. We walked down the improvised aisle in the garden while soft music played on the guitar that a friend of Alexei's brought from Italy, but I barely heard the music because my eyes were fixed on the man standing at the end of the path, waiting for me with tears already running down his face. Alexei wore a light gray suit that made his brown eyes seem even more intense, and the way he looked at me as I walked toward him made my heart race like it always did. When I finally reached the altar and Juliet placed my hand in Alexei's, he held my fingers with such gentleness and reverence that more tears threatened to fall from my own eyes. The officiant began the ceremony, but I was so focused on Alexei that I barely registered the words until we reached the vows we wrote personally. Alexei went first, quickly wiping away tears before starting to speak with his voice heavy with emotion. "Amber, I lost you once because of the fear and trauma I carried without processing. I lost precious months with you and our son because I was trapped by chains of the past that prevented me from embracing the future. But you didn't give up on me even when I had given up on myself. You gave me the chance to heal, to grow, to become the man I always should have been." He paused, wiping away more tears as he glanced briefly at Mateo and Juliet's arms before returning to me. "Today I promise to be the husband you deserve, present and attentive, communicative and vulnerable when necessary. I promise to be the father Mateo deserves, loving and patient, breaking cycles instead of perpetuating them. I promise to choose love over fear every day, choose growth over stagnation, choose our family over anything that threatens to separate us again. Without fear, without reservations, just complete and unconditional love." I had to wipe my own tears before I could speak, my voice coming out trembling but strong at the same time. "Alexei, you showed me that true love is worth the fight, worth going through fire, worth forgiving and giving second chances when the person really does the work to change. You faced demons that most people would spend their entire lives avoiding, healed wounds so deep they'd been bleeding for decades, all because you chose to prioritize us." I held his hands tighter, feeling immense gratitude to have this man back in my life. "I promise to build this new life together, not fix the old one, but create something completely new and better. I promise to be your partner in every sense, support your ongoing healing journey because trauma doesn't disappear completely but can be managed. I promise to love you and Mateo with everything I have, build a family based on honest communication and love we actively choose. Forever this time, without doubts, without paralyzing fears, just the three of us against the world. I now pronounce you husband and wife again," the officiant said, smiling broadly. "You may kiss the bride." Alexei pulled me into his arms and kissed me in a way that made my entire body react as it always did with him. But there was something deeper now, a connection that came from having survived the worst together and choosing to stay anyway. People applauded, but I barely heard because I was completely lost in that kiss that sealed our new beginning. "Papa." "Mama," Mateo shouted, clapping excitedly even without fully understanding what was happening, just knowing his parents were happy so he should be too. Alexei pulled away from the kiss laughing and walked over to Juliet to pick up our son in his arms. He held Mateo against his chest and looked at the baby with overflowing love. "Hi, son. Your parents just got married again, and this time it's forever, I promise. I'll be here for every moment of your life. Every important milestone, every challenge. I'll never let fear push me away from you again. Mateo obviously didn't understand the words, but clapped happily anyway, and then pulled his father's tie, making everyone laugh. I walked over to the two of them and hugged my complete family, Alexei putting one arm around me while holding Mateo with the other, the three of us together finally, as we should have been from the beginning. Complete family, Alexei whispered, kissing my forehead, and then Mateo's. My perfect family. Our family, I corrected, smiling against him. Built from broken pieces, but stronger exactly because of that. The party that followed was small, but full of genuine joy. Luigi made a moving toast about seeing the boss transform from a man destroyed by the past into a present and happy father and husband. Mark briefly shared about the courage it takes to confront generational trauma and choose to break cycles, and Juliet cried while talking about believing in second chances when people really do the work to change. When night fell and the guests left, the three of us were alone in the new house. I put Mateo to sleep in his carefully decorated room, kissed my son's forehead as he slept peacefully, and returned to the master bedroom where Alexei was waiting for me. We made it, he said, pulling me into his arms. Against all odds, we went through everything and got here. Married again, complete family. Entire future ahead of us. We made it because you chose to fight, I replied, touching his face gently. Chose to heal instead of running. Chose love instead of fear. I'm so proud of you, Alexei. He kissed me again, and this time there was no rush, just deep love and the promise of all the days we would have together ahead. Chapter 11.
I choose love.
A year had passed since we got married again. In that sunny garden with Mateo clapping without fully understanding but feeling the happiness around him. An entire year of building our life together in a completely new way, learning to be a family not based on blind passion and naive hopes like in the first marriage, but on conscious work, honest communication, and the daily choice to love each other through any challenge that appeared. Mateo was 2 years old now, and was a little force of nature who never stopped moving. He ran through the house on his short, chubby legs, shouting words that sometimes made sense and sometimes were completely made up, but always with that contagious excitement that only small children can have. His first words had been Papa and Mama, and now he chattered constantly, mixing Portuguese with Italian words that Alexei taught during their playtime. That specific Saturday afternoon, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard loud laughter coming from the living room. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and walked silently to the door to peek at the scene that made my heart melt completely inside my chest. Alexei was lying on the soft living room rug with Mateo on top of him, the two laughing so hard they had tears in their eyes. Our son was trying to tickle his father, who pretended to be extremely sensitive to every touch, screaming dramatically and rolling on the floor, making Mateo laugh even louder. The scene was so perfectly domestic and full of love that I had to bite my lip to keep from interrupting just to hug them. "I got you, Papa!" Mateo shouted in his still developing language as he jumped on top of Alexei, who pretended to be defeated. "You got me," Alexei agreed, wrapping his arms around his son and turning him sideways to tickle back. "But now I get you, little monster," Mateo squealed with joy, trying to escape, but clearly loving every second of that game. I watched for a few more minutes, that perfect interaction between father and son, before finally revealing myself leaning against the doorframe with a huge smile on my face. "You two are very loud," I commented, feigning severity. "The neighbors are going to complain again." "Let them complain," Alexei replied, still lying on the floor with Mateo now using his father's belly as a trampoline. "My son laughing is the best sound in the world, and I won't ask him to be quiet for anything." I walked over to them and sat on the rug beside them, watching Mateo finally get tired and throw himself on top of Alexei to rest. Our son lay there on his father's broad chest, breathing heavily from the effort, and Alexei automatically started running his hand over his back in that comforting gesture that calmed Mateo instantly. "You're an incredible father," I said with clear emotion in my voice as I watched that beautiful scene. "Better than I ever imagined would be possible when I was pregnant and terrified about everything." Alexei looked at me with those brown eyes that still made me melt after all these years. "Only because you taught me how to be, gave me the chance to learn, to grow, to become someone worthy of being his father. It wasn't me who taught you," I corrected, touching his face gently. "You learned on your own by doing therapy, confronting the trauma, choosing to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. I just gave you space and time to do that work. And it continues to be work," Alexei admitted with that raw honesty that had become the hallmark of our rebuilt relationship. "Therapy continues, every week still. Mark says I'll probably need it for a long time still, maybe always at some level. Generational trauma doesn't disappear completely just because you want it to, but you're managing it perfectly," I observed, looking at Matteo, who was starting to doze off against his father's chest. "Look at this. He feels so safe with you that he falls asleep instantly. Children sense when there's danger, Alexei. And our son only feels love and security when he's with you." "You really think so?" he asked with that vulnerability that still appeared sometimes when his deep insecurities surfaced. "Sometimes I'm still afraid, that one day something inside me will break and I'll react the way Giovanni reacted. Mark says it's unlikely because I actively work against it, but fear isn't always rational." I held his hand, squeezing tightly. "You'll never be your father. Never. You know how I know with absolute certainty? Because you're afraid of becoming him. Giovanni never had that fear, never questioned his actions, never felt guilt or remorse. But you feel all of that. That fear you carry is exactly what guarantees you'll never cross that line." "Thank you," he whispered with tears shining in his eyes, "for believing in me even when I doubted myself, for seeing the man I could be when I only saw the monster I feared becoming." Before I could respond, Matteo stirred on Alexei's chest and opened his still sleepy little eyes. He looked at his father, then at me, and a huge smile appeared on his little face. "Papa, Mama, play," he announced with renewed energy, as if he hadn't just almost fallen asleep. Alexei laughed, picking up his son in his arms and getting up from the floor. "Play what, little one? You just completely defeated me in that tickle fight." "Book," Matteo requested, pointing to the shelf full of colorful children's books we'd bought throughout the year. "Read story." "Of course," Alexei agreed, walking to the shelf and letting Matteo choose. "Which story today? Dinosaurs? Firefighters? Farm animals?" "Dragon," Matteo shouted, grabbing the book about dragons that was his absolute favorite lately. They settled on the big couch with Matteo sitting on Alexei's lap, and I joined them, snuggling on the other side, while Alexei began to read with that theatrical voice that made our son completely mesmerized. I watched the two of them, my husband and my son, totally immersed in the story about brave dragons and magical adventures, and felt deep gratitude that we had made it this far. "I love you," I whispered to Alexei over Matteo's head. He looked at me with that smile he reserved only for moments like this, intimate and perfect. "I love you too. You two are everything to me. Absolutely everything." Later that night, after putting Matteo to sleep after 3 stories, 2 glasses of water, and 4 requests for 5 more minutes, Alexei and I stood in the doorway of our son's room, watching him sleep peacefully, hugging his favorite stuffed dragon. "You know what Mark told me in the last session?" Alexei asked quietly, so as not to wake Matteo. "He said that seeing how I am with our son makes him hopeful about breaking generational cycles, that every time I choose patience instead of anger, kindness instead of violence, love instead of fear, I'm creating a new pattern that Matteo will carry into his own future." "And it's true," I agreed, resting my head on his shoulder. "You're giving him something you never had. Security, unconditional love, constant presence. Matteo will grow up knowing exactly what it's like to be loved by a father who chooses to be present in every moment." "I hope so," Alexei said, kissing my forehead. "I hope that when he's an adult, all he remembers from childhood are happy moments like today. Games, laughter, bedtime stories. Not fear, not pain, just love." We gently closed Matteo's bedroom door and walked hand in hand to our own room. 1 year married again, a life built on a foundation of healing and conscious work, and an entire future of possibilities ahead. It wasn't perfect, because perfection didn't exist, but it was ours, and it was good, and it was exactly what we needed. Chapter 12.
Our legacy is love.
3 years had passed since that first difficult but transformative year we lived as a rebuilt family. 3 years of continuous growth, of love that deepened every day, of small everyday moments that accumulated, forming a beautiful and complete life. Matteo was 5 years old now, a curious and talkative boy who asked about absolutely everything and had enough energy for 3 children, and I was pregnant again, 4 months to be exact, with a little belly that was starting to show under the loose clothes I wore. We found out 2 weeks ago through an ultrasound that clearly showed it would be a girl this time, and since then, Alexei had been walking around the house with a permanent smile on his face as if he'd won the lottery. We were sitting on the couch that Sunday afternoon, Matteo drawing on the living room floor with his crayons scattered everywhere, when Alexei placed his hand on my still small belly with that gentle reverence that melted me completely. "A girl," he said for the 1,000th time since we found out the sex. "A girl." I still can't completely believe it. "Are you afraid?" I asked, even knowing what the answer would be but wanting to hear it anyway. "Of having a daughter? Is it different from having a son?" "No," he replied without hesitation, looking into my eyes with that raw honesty that had become the foundation of our relationship. "I'm not afraid. I mean, I have the normal fear any father would have of wanting to protect his daughter from everything in the world, but not that paralyzing terror from before. Not the fear of becoming my father, of repeating patterns, of hurting those I love." "Why not?" I asked, touching his face gently, wanting to hear how he processed everything now after years of therapy and emotional work. Because I know who I am now, Alexei explained with a conviction that didn't exist years ago. I know I'm not Giovanni, that I'll never be. I look at Matteo and see 5 years of daily proof that I can be a loving, patient, present father. And our daughter will only know that side of me too. Only love, never fear or violence. The Salvatore bloodline continues, I observed, touching my belly where our daughter was growing, but different, completely different from what it was in the past. Yes, he agreed with clear emotion in his voice. No violence, no generational trauma, no fear, just love, security, presence. Our children will grow up knowing exactly what it's like to be unconditionally loved by parents who choose to be present in every moment. Mama, Matteo shouted from the floor, where he was drawing something that looked like a family of colorful stick figures. Look. I drew us! I leaned forward to get a better look at the drawing, while Alexei also moved closer curiously. There were 4 stick figures in different colors, 2 large and 2 small, all holding hands with huge smiles drawn on the round faces. It's beautiful, son, I praised, my heart warming. Who's who? That's Papa. Matteo pointed to the tallest stick figure in black. That's you, Mama. He pointed to the red stick figure next to it. That's me, the smaller blue stick figure. And that's my little sister, the tiny pink stick figure. You included your sister even though she hasn't been born yet, Alexei observed, clearly emotional. That's very special, Matteo. When does she get here? Matteo asked for the 100th time in the last week. I want to play with her. 5 more months, I replied, laughing at his impatience. She needs to grow more in Mommy's belly before she's ready to be born and meet you. Too long, Matteo complained, pouting. I want her now. I know you do, Alexei said, picking up his son and placing him on his lap. But when she's born, you're going to be the big brother. Do you know what that means? What? Matteo asked with his little eyes shining with curiosity. It means you're going to protect her, Alexei explained with appropriate seriousness. You're going to teach her things. You're going to play with her. You're going to be an example of how to be a good person. It's an important responsibility, but I know you're going to be an incredible big brother. I will, Matteo promised with all the conviction a 5-year-old child can have. I'll protect her always, and teach her to draw and play dragon and read stories. I'm sure you will, I agreed, stroking his dark hair that was identical to his father's. She'll be very lucky to have you as a brother. Matteo eventually went back to his drawings on the floor, now creating an entire sequence of images about things he would do with his sister when she was born, and Alexei pulled me closer on the couch, putting his arm around me while his free hand returned to my belly. Thank you, he whispered against my hair, for everything, for not giving up on me when it would have been so much easier to give up, for giving me the chance to heal and grow, for building this beautiful family with me, for this incredible gift growing inside you. Thank you, I replied, resting my head on his shoulder, for doing the hardest work, for confronting demons most people would spend their entire lives avoiding, for choosing to be different, for being the man I always knew was hidden under all that fear and trauma. I still do therapy, he reminded, as he always did when I praised his progress. Every week still. I'll probably always need it. Mark says trauma doesn't disappear completely. We just learn to manage it better. And you manage it perfectly, I assured, looking at Matteo drawing happily, completely oblivious to the deep conversation we were having. Our children will never know the Alexei who was so afraid of being a father. They'll only know the loving, patient, present man you chose to become. Our daughter, Alexei said, returning to his favorite subject lately. We need to think about names, something that means something special, that carries hope. How about Sophia? I suggested, having thought about this in recent weeks. It means wisdom. And after everything we've been through, wisdom seems appropriate. Sophia Salvatore. Alexei tested the name, letting the syllables roll off his tongue. Perfect. Our little Sophia. Papa! Mama! Matteo called again, pulling us from the intimate moment. Can we go to the park? I want to play on the swing. Of course we can, Alexei replied, standing up and offering me his hand to help me up from the couch. Let's enjoy this beautiful day as a family. The 3 of us walked to the park near our house, Matteo running ahead with infinite energy, while Alexei held my hand, keeping a slower pace because of the pregnancy. I watched our son play on the swing, shouting for us to push higher, and felt the life growing inside me, and looked at the man beside me who had gone through fire to be there. We made it, I whispered to Alexei, as we pushed Matteo on the swing together. Against all odds, all the pain, all the obstacles, we managed to build this. Real family, true love, future full of hope. We made it because you believed, he replied, kissing my forehead. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and now look at what we have. Matteo, Sophia on the way, a life built on love and healing instead of fear and trauma. It's more than I ever dreamed possible. The sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks as we walked home, Mateo between us holding one hand from each of us and chattering about everything he did at the park. When we got home, and I put our son to bed after the nightly ritual of bath, story, and goodnight kisses, I found Alexei on the balcony looking at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, snuggling against him. "About how life can change completely," he replied, wrapping me in his arms. "A few years ago, I was completely lost, trapped by trauma, unable to accept the idea of being a father. And now I have an incredible son sleeping in there, a daughter on the way, and the woman I love in my arms. The Salvatore bloodline continues, but in a completely new way. Love, not pain. Presence, not abandonment. Healing, not trauma. New legacy," I agreed, touching my belly. "For Matteo and Sophia, and who knows how many more. However many more you want," Alexei said, smiling. "I'll spend the rest of my life being the best father and husband I can be. That's my promise, my legacy, my purpose." And there, under the stars, complete family and bright future ahead, I knew with absolute certainty that we had broken the cycles and created something beautiful and new. Reflection. Writing this story was a rewarding journey. Narrating through Amber's eyes allowed me to explore complex layers of love, pain, fear, and hope in an intimate and visceral way. Each chapter brought its own unique challenges. The hardest part was balancing dramatic tension with the first-person narrative, ensuring that Amber remained the constant voice even when important events happened outside her immediate field of vision. Translating such deep emotions, Amber's terror upon discovering the pregnancy after hearing Alexei's brutal words, the despair of divorce, the cautious hope of reconciliation, required diving completely into her perspective. Alexei's transformation, although narrated through Amber's eyes, was particularly moving, following his journey from a man trapped by generational trauma to a loving and present father, touched on universal themes of healing, forgiveness, and breaking cycles. The most rewarding part was building the gradual growth of the relationship, showing that true love isn't just initial passion, but a conscious daily choice to work, heal, and stay. And if you want to see another story crafted with great care, click on the video that appears now on your screen.